Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Behind every great man is a great woman. And that is only partially true. The women are almost always better than the men. That's entirely true. This is the very issue explored by the new film, The Wife, starring and directed by our next guest. It's the story of an aging writer who is set to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature while his better half watches from the shadows. Let's take a look.
Next time I introduce you, try a little eye contact.
And next time, don't refer to me as your son, the half-baked writer.
You shouldn't need my approval to write.
Everyone needs approval, Joe.
Hello?
Am I speaking to Mr. Castleman?
I'd like my wife to get on the extension.
Hello, I'm on.
It is my great honor to tell you, Mr. Castleman, that you have been chosen to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature.
Tell me this isn't some great big fat joke.
It's all real, darling. Breathe.
Uh-huh.
Welcome to Stockholm. We are so delighted to have you here.
I came across some of your stories in the college journal. Beautifully written.
Joe had a very heavy hand as a teacher.
Did he encourage you to keep writing?
A writer writes because he has something personal to say. You write with intelligence, but you're detached.
The characters are supposed to be detached, especially the mother.
My wife doesn't write, thank God. Otherwise, I'd suffer permanent writer's block.
Don't ever think that you can get their approval.
Whose?
The men. The ones who decide who gets to be taken seriously.
A writer has to write.
A writer has to be read, honey.
I am aware of Joe's various indiscretions. His affairs have nothing to do with you. That's a deep-seated fear of inadequacy.
Don't paint me as a victim. I am much more interesting than that.
Don't walk away from me, damn it!
I can't do it anymore. I can't take it. I can't take the humiliation. What are we doing?
Joan, we're not bad people.
I think you are sick and tired of Joe Castleman.
I would like to convey to you the warm congratulations of the Swedish Academy. You have reinvented the very nature of storytelling.
Tell me about yourself. Do you have an occupation?
I do.
And what is that?
I am a kingmaker.
Everybody, please welcome from The Wife, director Björn Runge, Christian Slater, and Starke, Jonathan Pryce, and Glenn Close. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hey. Thanks so much for being here. Congratulations on this film. I loved it. It's an incredible script. It's beautiful direction and absolutely wonderful performances. I know you're here to be interviewed by me, but it's a really, really great piece of work. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And so much of this film rests not just upon the first part of it, the second part of it, when everything is revealed, rests upon your eyes, your face, close-ups of you and how you're taking everything in. And when you go back and watch the film for a second time, it works even better because of the faces that you are making. So can you talk a little bit about, before we even talk about what the movie's about, can we talk a little bit, I'm fascinated with how you calibrated your performance throughout the film and how you chose how you would look in each close-up and take.
I'm not quite as
you have no idea. You're like
conscious of I think we spent a lot of time working together, talking around the table, and for me, I had to go beat by beat by beat to understand why she didn't leave him, because I thought that would be in all the women's minds, and I needed to convince myself. And I think in that exploration, the two of us found a very real, very complex marriage and love story. So I think basically that's what it is, with, you know, the journey being he finds out he's gotten the Nobel Prize in Literature, and it's our journey to Sweden for him to get that prize, and what happens.
Yeah, you said you sat around the table going through it beat by beat. That's a rarity that I think people get in movies these days, but it's something that shows in this movie, I think, because the script for this, it feels so theatrical, and I don't mean that in a big, broad way, I just mean in a structural way, in terms of how the stakes are raised and where the performances go. So did you guys have rehearsal time beforehand, or how did you go through the script beat by beat?
Well, it was table rehearsal, as we say, and sorting out any problems in the script, making sure that everything would be telling the story correctly. And it meant, having done that work together, that once we got on set, we weren't spending time saying, what do I mean when I say this, or what does she mean, or whatever. And our relationship on set became very organic, and we reacted to each other, listened to each other. And it's interesting, I mean, yes, you can pull out Glenn's close. In fact, she's changed her name now. She's now known as Glenn Close-Up after this film.
Have you had this whole press tour in your pocket? And we
First time.
That was
an exclusive.
Thank you, everybody. That was an
Thank you. Yeah.
And you got a round of applause for it.
Thank you. I'm just a applause whore. But those moments, they're the moments that are, you know, I think I speak for Glenn. You don't choose to look in a particular way. Or you are reacting to the person you're in the scene with. And then it's up to Björn and Lena, the editor, to choose those moments to tell that character's story. And they work beautifully well. I mean, because I saw it for the first time last week on a big screen with an audience. And of course, I hadn't seen any of those things that Björn chose of Glenn's, because they're often, she's either behind my back or a long way away from me. But that she's telling her story with those silences. And I think it's a wonderful achievement by Björn and Lena, and Glenn especially. Can you talk about developing your character? Because in so many other performances, or so many other variations of this kind of character, he would be the great manipulator. Whereas your performance, he's sort of a befuddled, arrogant buffoon a lot of the time. Really? That's how you saw me? That's exactly how I saw it.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Well,
don't worry, you'll get another applause.
The thing,
Pryce is right.
No.
I haven't even done the song yet. Well, the thing is that both our characters, my character especially, he's not a manipulator of the situation. The situation happens, and it's a situation that they decided on together. So, and all I am is the public face of that relationship. Obviously, as you said, it's everything you say about this film can be a spoiler alert. You know,
Yeah,
so
I'm being very cagey. I'm attempting to be.
It starts out lovingly, and then it evolves on its own as the relationship continues to build.
As the stakes of the relationship continue to build as well. You are playing your mother's character, but young. And this is your mother. I don't think I have to over-explain this. How did the two of you talk about your performances? Did you talk about your performances and your characters at all to sort of try to match them at all?
Oh, of course. No, this role was hugely a collaborative effort. You know, it was a lot of time around a table, discussing every possible detail of what makes Joan Castleman Joan. And obviously, you know, how life experiences has affected her as life goes on. No, it was an extraordinary experience, and I loved every minute of it. You know, it's just a very special character that I still think about, and I think about fondly, and I will. You know, it's hugely personal experience for us, and it's so wonderful, you know, being here and discussing this character.
Were you ever on set together? I mean, you're not on set together, but did you ever show up for each other's scenes or anything?
We actually shot it in sequence. So it was myself and Harry Lloyd for the first 2 weeks, I believe. And then right after we wrapped, everybody else came to set. So we missed the party, unfortunately.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. No, I think what the reality is that Annie really was responsible for creating the character, for laying down certain very key traits, her shyness, her passion to be a writer, you know, wanting to be a writer as much as Joe. And then what happens, you know, compromises, you could say certain sacrifices. I think in some ways their son is a sacrifice, and more she sees what, you know, how he has been affected. But Yeah, and I was not around when Annie shot. I didn't, that was her thing, and between her and Bjorn and Harry.
Did you look at her footage at all or anything to see if you wanted to, like, present an older version of some of the stuff that she was doing or anything?
I looked at her footage because I was so curious to see what she did, and I was so proud. You know, she can speak with her face, and it's a beautiful performance. And I see more and more in it each time I see it. So yes, I did.
I do also want to, you know, he's not here, but I want to give a big shout out to Harry Lloyd, who was an amazing person to play alongside, and he studied you quite, you know,
he did.
intimately.
Yeah. Harry and I didn't talk about things either, but I'd known him and he'd known me for a while, and he watched a lot of old footage of me as a younger actor. And it was interesting that I could see or hear the speech rhythms that he picked up on that went into Joe.
I loved how those scenes complemented the later scenes too. I mean, the things that they were able to incorporate, like the jumping on the bed and that sort of being, whenever these two have a success, that was something that they did. You know, didn't matter how young they were, how old they were. That was just something that was a beautiful through line, I think, throughout.
Yeah, and you said it was a wonderful performance of the face, and I think that's one thing that the two of you tapped into so well, which we hear it in the trailer, is he says the character is too detached, or the character in her book is too detached, but the two of you, your performance, the face that you make is someone who stays above the fray all the time, who doesn't let the world really affect them, at least publicly. And I thought both of you tapped into that really well in your performances.
And I just have to say that I think why we all were able to create the ensemble that we did and have the on-screen relationships that we did is through the delicate and beautiful touch of Bjorn. Who really knew where to put the camera to capture what we were doing and how to use a close-up to keep an audience emotionally involved and how to light a close-up. So that was a huge luxury for us, and that trust gave us freedom.
And Bjorn has a great theater background as well, so.
We're going to talk about you now.
For me as a director, it's all in the preparation, because when we come to set, it's very much to taking care of those blessed actors' energy in the best way. And then we get it into the editing room, and there we try to make gold out of these shootings that we have done.
Sorry, and he has a very special editor that he works with. I don't know if you want to say.
It's my wife.
Yeah.
Behind every great man, once again.
Her name is Lena, and we have been working for many years, so it's professional.
I'm curious, you said, you know, it's all about preparation. When you prep, do you block out how you're going to shoot it? Do you storyboard, or do you go in and watch what the actors are doing and then figure out where to put your camera? Together.
We block the scenes together, and with the photographer also. So, but for me, the preparation
very much about what the actors are doing. So then you can kind of plan around that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's very much a trust for each other.
Christian, you play the would-be biographer of Jonathan Pryce's character. It's a person that I'm always fascinated about when I hear interviews with biographers of like famous people. It's like a person who has dedicated their creative life to somebody else's creative life, which is such a weird dynamic. It's like I'm sure it's noble, but sometimes it feels lecherous in a way.
Sure.
And I think you play that.
And like a mosquito buzzing around.
Lecherous as in a leech.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of parasitic. Yes, yeah, exactly.
Is that used wrong? Is lecherous change? Should I?
Lecherous is pretty. It's not pleasant.
True.
Yeah.
It's sexual.
Is it? Yeah.
That is true. You're right. Like a leech, I should have said. Yeah. Correct. Thank you. Like a leech. Not.
See, you learn something every day, don't you?
What a panel. Yeah.
Do you want to give him applause for that or what?
Thank you. Fly me to... Oh, no.
But Christian, you've been around for some time. I'm sure you've had people who wanted to write big articles about you, wanted to write big books about you in some way. Did you tap into any of that idea of this type of person? Well, I mean, he's above a paparazzi, right? He's a little more intellectual than that. But at the same time, there's a part of him that's not.
Well, I believe that he's certainly obviously a fan of Joseph Castleman. I think he's a guy who has been obsessed. He's admired him. He's wanted to emulate this man. And then I think in doing the research for his particular book, made some discoveries. There were some questionable things, some red flags, so of course he wants to start to, sneak around and get some information from the son, from the wife, as much as he can. And for me, certainly having done interviews for the last however many decades I've been doing and working in this business, I managed to, pick up some cues and some ideas from them. And I tried to incorporate as much of that that I have observed into this character.
The interviewers that are trying to stir some shit up and see if they can get a good story.
Yeah, those guys that like to stir up all those settled leaves in your life. Like to jump in the puddle and, mix things around.
It's a reality in our world that even when people use recorders, a lot of times they still get things wrong.
Yeah, and at the same time,
there's a lot of sloppy journalism. I'm sorry to say it, but it's true. So we all have experience with people like that.
But at the same time, today I have, certainly after playing this character, I have a better understanding of what it is to be a journalist, how difficult it can be, when you're dealing with a subject that doesn't really want to talk to you or give you that kind of information. But I do believe that obviously it's extraordinarily vital for journalism to exist and for them to pursue the truth in every possible way.
Oh, absolutely.
Well said.
Hey, let's give him a round of applause, too. We're going to get a record for the most rounds of applause on this interview, I think, on this stage. We're going to get a record. Glenn, we talked about your performance. We talked about sort of how you work with Bjorn and everybody else in the cast. What attracted you to this role? This movie does feel like a movie for this moment in time.
Which is extraordinary. I think I was attached to it, for about 5 years. Wow. And the novel by Meg Willitzer was written, I think, over 14 years ago. And the screenplay not long after that. So it's a story that's been around. I was attracted to it just because it was new territory for me. I'd never played a character like that. And I had a lot of questions that needed to be answered for me in order to play her. My main question was, why doesn't she leave him? And in answering that question for myself and working with Jonathan, I think we came up with a relationship that is much more complicated than just that one question.
Well, I think it's so complicated that I probably have an answer for why she didn't leave him, but that's also my answer.
Right.
And it could be different from your answer, yet that ambiguity doesn't sort of ruin the movie for me whatsoever.
I think that's the beauty of the script and the beauty of the film, is that the audience can take away from it whatever they want to take away from it. And it's an intelligent film, and I think there'll be lots of discussions and debates, especially between couples, about how they see the film. But it's said that this film seems very relevant to now, to the sort of Me Too generation. But as Glenn says, that novel was written 14 years ago, is it? And these issues of the male suppression of the female, they've been around forever. My first outing with it was Shakespeare, Taming of the Shrew especially, which is about a man molding a woman into whatever he wanted her to be. And if the film or the play is good enough whenever it's made, dealing with a social issue or a political issue, it becomes relevant to whatever time it is that you watch it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. Let's get some questions from our audience. Who has a question? Right here.
Hello.
Hello. Hi.
I know that there's quite an extensive theater background from everyone in this group. I was just wondering how the transition from, say, like Sunset Boulevard, that's very large and grandiose, to going to a film that's more minute and very subdued. Is there an easy transition? Is there something that you guys do?
I think it's an adjustment of where you put your energy for me. When you're doing stage, I always think of it as setting up an actual energy field, and that helps project. In film, the film would read that energy field and almost be too big. But I think for both, it's the power of thought. I don't think it's any different on stage than it is for film. Film has the one art form that has the close-up. And I think it's the close-up that in certainly stories like this, but it's how an audience stays emotionally engaged, is through the close-up. And that's what we don't have on stage.
Yeah. But I mean, I enjoy going between film and stage. And I think the stage is very much more the actor's world, where because you can be frustrated when you've made a film, not necessarily in this one, but when and definitely not in this one, when directors cut away from you just as you're about to have your great thought or your great moment. But when you're on stage, you are, in front of an audience, you're your own editor, you're your own focus puller, and you can manipulate the story, always having an ear on how the audience are reacting. So I enjoy that very much. And it has been said that stage is exactly the same as film, but it's louder.
Yeah.
Come on.
You want more?
I was hoping for a mild titter. Got one.
The other thing that was great was that because Björn does come from the theater, there was a way of his style of shooting that was very unobtrusive. And you never really felt like the camera was in your face. And we also had the luxury of having 2 cameras. So the scenes between us, the reactions that are happening are actually genuine and real, and they were able to capture those moments, as opposed to usually how it goes is you shoot one actor, the other actor's off camera thinking, oh boy, I hope I remember this when they come around and do my coverage. So that wasn't the case here.
That's so interesting. I didn't realize they shot with 2 cameras. I feel like normally I can tell when a movie is shooting with 2 cameras because they get even, I hate to say this, they get even lazier about how they shoot it, and it's just like a shot, reverse shot over the shoulder and then maybe a wide. With this, you had these really beautiful close-ups where the other person wasn't in frame at all, if I remember correctly. Not all the time. Can you talk about you shooting like that?
I remember we were not talking about a first and a second camera. The both camera was equal to each other. So it's so strange because it's my middle son that is a photographer. It's a family film, this. But my middle son is a second photographer. Really? So the first day he come from Sweden, his name is Stellan. And the first thing, he has to frame his close-up during that conversation around the cafe table. And we were testing him, and he did it really good. So he was joining us through the ride. But for me, the 2 cameras are equal. And that means that we don't lit for one camera, we lit for both cameras. So it was, I think it's maybe 30% of the frames are from the so-called second camera. So we use them very much.
Oh, sorry, Jonathan, I
was just saying that the best thing about making a film in this way is that when I was younger, I always thought I had to accommodate the camera. And act towards the camera and get my face around it all. And they, in the old days, the cinematographers kind of demanded it. You were the last thing they thought about. You would do a bit of a blocking, then they'd go away and light it, and then they'd change your blocking by the time you came back to the scene. This time, and in more recent years, the camera, I think it's because they're lighter and digital, and you can light a room without lighting specifics. The camera finds the actor. So you just get on with doing it and not worrying about the camera. And
you don't have to change the reels also. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like the cameras can just keep going and going and going.
But you have to have a lot of trust in the cameraman, because you can be in the middle of a scene. I remember doing middle of a scene with Glenn, and suddenly you notice the camera's drifting off somewhere. And you go, oh my God, and then, oh no, he's back. And there he is, And it makes for a great energy in this scene.
And I'm obsessed as a director by the authentic emotions. And with 2 cameras working like this that Jonathan is describing, it's what's helped to catch the energy between the actors.
How do you know what's authentic?
I just know it.
Right. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
So I have a question for Christian, actually. I'm a really big fan of your movies, and a lot of the movies touch upon really serious and controversial topics, and I'm curious how that like helped you as an actor and how it like formed your, career.
Well, yeah, that is true, I suppose. There has been an anarchistic quality to a lot of the projects that I've been involved with, and but I don't think I'm. Like this experience was much not really there wasn't a lot of anarchy here. I mean, this was a really nice. We shot it over.
Had you ever done anything like this before?
I don't. Well, I've done like softer.
Yeah.
I did do Untamed Heart, where I was that poor guy with the fake heart in there. He was pretty sweet.
With the fake heart?
He wasn't that much of a rebel. He was just he was a lover.
Heathers and like.
Heathers, of course. No, I definitely
like
know what you're referring to. I mean, Heathers and Pump Up the Volume and True Romance and even Mr. Robot now. I mean, what's been interesting for me is to observe how the stakes have only gotten higher. I mean, the subject matters that we were talking about and dealing with in a movie like Pump Up the Volume, it was school, there was still diversity, there was bullying, there was homosexuality, there were all these still relevant topics, but those issues have only become more worldwide and more talked about and sadly sometimes even a little scarier.
I have one more question. What is your dog's name? How old is your dog? Let's talk about your dog before we go.
His name is Pip, or as his registered name is Sir Pippin of Beanfield.
Oh my God.
On that note, the Wife is going to be in theaters August 17th, right? It's a beautiful film.
The day before my birthday, too, just FYI.
Well, go see it. For anything else for Christian Slater's birthday.
I snuck one in.
Knock a round of applause in.
August 17th, and everybody give them a big round of applause, especially Sir Pippin.